There is no beverage as fascinating as tea. It is tasteful, not only in a literal sense, but also in a cultural sense. Whether in the East or the West, people have been obsessed with this caffeinated beverage. It is said that the tea plant originated from what is now Yunnan province, the southwestern part of China. This mysterious plant has a self-oxidation effect, and picked leaves gradually and spontaneously turn brown. We can stop its oxidation by applying some form of heating process. Green tea is unoxidized, while black tea is fully oxidized. Oolong tea is the one partially oxidized. All kinds of tea are made from the same species of plant, and differences come from how they are processed. Though we have a variety of ways to enjoy tea across the world, this beverage has captivated humanity throughout history, sometimes enriching our cultures and lives, at other times driving us mad. How has this tea intertwined with the history of humankind? You may associate tea with English breakfast or afternoon tea, where British ladies pour milk and add sugar cubes in a fancy ceramic cup. However, sugar as a complementary product to black tea turned modern British history cruel and inhumane. As tea evolved from a luxury to a daily necessity in the 18th century, consumption of sugar also drastically increased. This enormous demand for sugar was satisfied by sugar plantations in the Caribbean region. The cultivation of sugarcane requires intensive physical labor under the severe tropical climate, and this massive labor force was provided by the Atlantic slave trade. Year after year, thousands of enslaved people were transported from Africa. British citizens would have sweetened their 4 o'clock tea with beautiful sugar cubes, produced in brutal sugar plantations which they knew nothing about. This poses an awkward ethical question. At every sipping of sugar-sweetened tea, they unintentionally took part in enslaving Africans. Were they guilty of this inhumane act? In modern history, crimes often resulted from ignorance and indifference. As globalization has proceeded, the world has become more complex and interconnected than ever before. Even buying a low-priced t-shirt can be inhumane, if it was produced by exploited workers somewhere in the world. Is it a sinful act to buy a product while knowing that it involves exploitation? Do we have a duty to know? Is it practically possible to verify the innocence of every product and service before purchase? How can we behave morally, when we have no way to recognize all the relevant facts? The 19th and 20th centuries were the age of imperialism. Imperialism is the practice in which a nation engages in diplomatic and military activities to expand its own interests. Specifically within the context of capitalist market economy, it means the use of coercive diplomacy and military aggression to secure markets for products and sources of raw materials. As tea grew popular, it became one of the symbolizing products of imperialism. Britain had imported tea from China, but the Qing dynasty didn't have any particular goods they wanted to buy from Britain. So the trade between Britain and China resulted in a considerable trade deficit for Britain, leading to the payment of vast amounts of silver. As a solution to this silver shortage, the British government came up with a frightening idea: production and export of the drug, opium. Opium is an addictive drug made from the poppy, and those who habitually use it will be weakened both physically and mentally. The East India Company produced opium in its Indian colony, and smuggled it into China. Before long, opium addiction spread throughout China, and trade balances reversed. The Qing dynasty suffered the loss of silver this time, and the growing number of addicts became a serious social problem. The Qing government banned the sale and destroyed the confiscated opium. In reprisal for this crackdown, the British government decided to go to war, which ended in a one-sided victory for Britain. The Opium War, which was triggered by the tea trade, ended up revealing the terrifying nature of industrial revolution and imperialism in Asian countries, including Japan, sparking the Meiji Restoration. the history of tea in Japan cannot be discussed without mentioning tea ceremony. Perhaps the most common typical impression of the tea ceremony is that it is a bunch of formal and rigid practices that adheres to tradition. The artist Okamoto Taro once criticized it, saying, "We can enjoy tea in any way we like. Why do we have to drink it in a specific manner?" Probably many people would agree with him. What is the essence of the tea ceremony? At heart, tea ceremony is about rational and flexible consideration to provide a pleasant time for both the host and the guests, and manners and practices are nothing more than a set of means to express hospitality. For example, the host turns the tea bowl while serving tea, not because it's a rule, but because of the intention to allow guests to enjoy the beautiful design of the bowl. The remarkable aspect of tea ceremony is that it has elevated the ordinary act of drinking tea into an artistic manner of human interactions. Manners of tea ceremony are a series of standardized formats to exhibit respect and consideration. So just following the forms and traditions would be missing the point. Again, manners are just means to an end, and a means is valuable only when it serves its purpose. The nature of long-lasting traditions is not an obstinate refusal to change. Instead, it is an adaptation to meet the changing demands of the times. Indeed, traditions and practices have continuously changed through ages. In the Meiji era, for instance, they invented a new style where both the host and the guests sit on chairs to enjoy tea. Recently, the number of people who practice tea ceremony is declining. Also, there has gradually been criticism of its conventional ways, such as stipulating the colors of tools for males and females, as it is stereotyping gender differences. How is tea ceremony going to change in the 21st century? How Japanese people have dealt with tea clearly reflects their cultural identity. The method of consuming tea as matcha was introduced to Japan from China in the 12th century. While the practice soon died out in China, tea culture in Japan evolved uniquely over the subsequent 4 centuries, eventually organized into a system, with the arrival of Sen no Rikyu. He established the concept wabi-sabi, an aesthetic of rusticity, simplicity, and imperfection, and this philosophy is consistent in every aspect of tea ceremony, gestures, tools, ornaments of the room, and so on. In a tea room, we find rusticity and simplicity perfectly compatible with grace and beauty. Rather, they turn imperfection into virtue, in which some people find a model for post-capitalist society. What was originally created in China grew independently in Japan, and it has been preserved even today. Throughout history, Japan has repeated similar behaviors in various fields, such as written language, literature, political theory, and religion. For example, the monk Kukai visited China in 804 AD and brought back esoteric Buddhism. After he came back to Japan, Kukai established a far more sophisticated doctrine by systematically arranging the logical framework. While the popularity of esoteric Buddhism has died down in China and India, it has been improved and conserved in Japan. In modern days, they switched their mentor from China to the West, from which they imported industrialization, imperialism, and consumerism. Perhaps Japanese people subconsciously believe that great things come from the outside. Most of Japanese culture has a foreign source, which has been transformed to create a Japanese style. This is part of their cultural genius. At the same time, they are always haunted by a sense of insecurity about their cultural identity, since they have looked up to other cultures as mentors by humbling themselves. Communities of tea ceremony often try to appeal to the public, saying that they can learn the spirit of Japan, and apparently many people get interested in it for this reason. Japanese people may always seek to recognize their cultural and ethnic background, since they harbor a delicate and somewhat fragile confidence in their identity.